EA is now on Twitch. Join us Wednesday nights when Alistair reads a bedtime story, and Sunday mornings for a few hours of chill casual gaming, plus interviews, special guests, pickup streams, and more. Visit twitch.tv/EA Podcasts and follow us to be notified when we go live, plus access VODs of past broadcasts.
Escape Pod. Episode 904. Itoro Fey Queen. By Maurice Broadus.
Hello, and welcome to Escape Pod, your weekly science fiction podcast. I'm Mer Lafferty, your host and co-editor for this episode. Our story this week is Itoro Fey Queen by Maurice Broadus. This was first published in Saturday Morning Transport. Maurice Broadus is a community organizer and teacher. His work has appeared in magazines like Lightspeed, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, Asimov's, and Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. His books include the urban fantasy trilogy, The Knights of Breton Court, the steampunk works, Buffalo Soldier and Pip My Airship, and the middle grade detective novels, The Usual Suspects and Unfadable. His project, Sorcerers, is being adapted as a television show for AMC. As an editor, he's worked on Dark Faith, Fireside Magazine, and Apex. His next book is Black Panther, T'Challa Declassified. Learn more at mauricebroadus.com. Sheree L. Stewart is our narrator and has directed several projects available on Amazon Prime and lends her voice talents as a regular guest narrator for the Nightlight Horror Podcast and now Escape Pod and Pseudopod. Currently, she's busy working as writer, producer, and narrator of the Good Morning Antioch podcast, a science fiction black comedy available now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Now you're going to need some adrenaline to inject. It's story time.
Itoro Fey Queen by Maurice Broadus. Narrated by Sheree L. Stewart. It's all gone, the ethereal voice whispered, almost robotic and clearly distant, its desperate lament choked off with a gasp which tugged Itoro back from unconsciousness. Sprawled on her back, dazed and in shock, she sat up along the cavern floor. Through one of the station's viewports, the greeting hollow read, "Welcome to Oyigiyigi, Mungano's portal to the space mining industry." Her memory still a jumble of images. When the first explosion happened, the force of the blast slammed her against a console. A juncture collapsed, burying her under a shower of debris. The venting pumps reduced to a scorching mound of embers. Itoro shifted the beam from her. She attempted to stand, but as soon as she tried to put weight on her legs, she cried out and fell back onto the ground. Her left leg was broken, though she couldn't tell the extent of the damage through her phase suit. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," the voice muttered. Mac? Mac Johnson was the chief mechanic from Original Earth. OE. Oyigiyigi was originally conceived as Mungano's joint venture with the OE's provisional government, the Liberation Investment Support Cooperative, the LISC. They hoped to develop platforms to explore and extract off-world resources. Things were not going well. Itoro, thank God you're alive." "Status update?" she asked. "I don't understand you," he said. That wasn't good. That meant Maya, the AI that ran most of Oyigiyigi's systems, including translating the many languages spoken throughout Mungano, was down. Essential functions only, like a body's autonomic system. Itoro switched to English rather than her native Zulu. "Status update. A piece of the asteroid you were mining sheared off due to an accident. It crashed into another section. Oyigigi was a collection of near-Earth asteroids, failed planetary remnants. The Citadel was the capital of the Oyigigi asteroid belt and attached to the Nguenya mine. The mine took its name from the oldest mine in Alkebulan, on all of OE actually. Positional thrusters are down. We're drifting, dead in space. All right, we need to set repair priorities. Still disoriented, Itoro knew she needed to make it to the secondary control room. Casualties? Where's Asagai? It gets worse, Matt continued as if he didn't hear her. The accident has sent your asteroid on a trajectory toward Titan or one of the other moons in their gravity well. It's only a matter of time before we have to EDS. We're not EDSing. The emergency disconnect system was a measure of last resort in case of catastrophic failure. To preserve the rest of the mine, or in this case, a planet, the station was prepared to detonate sections of the asteroid. Give me some time to check for survivors. Get power back up. Itoro, it's a safety issue. I can give you, at best, an hour, but after that, understood. Matt cleared his throat, mustering up the strength to continue speaking. Hey, sorry about all of that earlier. Now's not the time. Itoro was in no mood for Mac's lackluster apology. Her head ached, but she wasn't sure if that was still because she was still mildly hungover from her coronation feast. The daughter of Mansa Hakim, she could trace her lineage back through King Sbuza II. Though largely ceremonial, the gathering was mostly an excuse to celebrate being with one another. From the time the event was announced, every time Mac needed to address her, it was with a mildly derisive tone and the title, She Who Would Be Queen, capping the evening with him rampaging in a drunken harangue before he was escorted out. It was clear he didn't understand the Nguni at all. As the oldest peoples within the Mungano community, they'd be better described as a confederacy of peoples. Ndebele, Swazi, Xhosa, and Zulu, who came together as a founding family of Mungano. Named for a region on OE, they brought their entire cultures to the desolate mining operation. She didn't have much time. Their asteroid passed the tiny array of satellites used to measure and assess cosmic debris. Itoro needed to make her way to the bridge before EDS became necessary. She still couldn't put much weight on her leg. Phase suits acted as a filtering system and interfaced with the outer carapace of the specialized miner's nav suit. The physics of artificial gravity was not her forte, but due to their surface interactions, they generated a field that interacted with Oyigigi's field to better simulate gravity. The nav suit had been damaged. Its power couplings needed repair. She hoped the phase suit worked well enough to continue to provide additional oxygen, but filter the thin air of the mines. Long-term exposure to gases, not to mention the silicosis from breathing silica particles and traces of the various ores, might be irreparable. She locked the servos of her nav suit around her left leg, essentially disabling them so they could serve as a brace. Standing, tentative and awkward, she slowly tested her leg. The pain caused her to grimace, but she could push through that. Scurrying along the tunnel, Itoro cursed herself for not trusting her instincts. Most of the previous night, a vague unease had nagged at her, with images flooding her mind of the cave crying tears of falling rock, the mines creaking, groaning like an old man's bones. Her people's journey was a long, hard road. Itoro imagined a view from her homeland, a dense dawn fog rolling across a beautiful mountain view, the cold damp burned away by the rising sun. She wanted to see it one more time. Mungano established itself in 2050 at the close of the lunar Ukumbizi War between OE and First World, their name before they ceded from OE sovereignty. As Mungano entered a period of isolation and healing, called the Upunyaji, it sifted through the wreckage of its past and reconciled the weight of their collective history through storytelling, listening, and being with one another. As part of the treaty ending the war, OE passed the General Mining Act Amendment of 2051, becoming the first trade agreement between OE and Mungano, authorizing and protecting the rights of Mungano's ability to prospect and mine for economic minerals. When the Nguni moved to the asteroid belt, LISC had little presence in space. with their hands full stabilizing OE due to destruction after the war and the continued assault of climate reshaping. The Nguni leveraged risk for a dream, trading what they knew on OE for a collective prospector's life, finding their fortune among the stars, the way Mungano came to be, on their terms. LASC designated them squatters, while Mungano welcomed them into their alliance. Her people labored under a lingering unspoken sense that because they were a part of Oyigiyigi, like the mine itself, they were seen strictly as resources to be extracted and treated like second-class members. But they were proud, and she would not see her people's hard work come to ruin. What the Nguni had created in Oyigiyigi made no sense, but was also beautiful, turning the stony outcropping into relief artwork once a tunnel had been exhausted, beveling the ore to produce an elegant sheen along the walls, creating beauty where they could. Itoro missed the thrum of machine work in the unseen tunnels as the pumps circulated and scrubbed the air. She hated the smell of the mine, something close to rotten meat with a metallic twang. Underground, the aqueduct system managed the water resources. Overhead, narrow bridges and walkways ran. The crosswalks became bridges to nowhere in the shadows, shorn from the section of the mine they had originally connected to. The once floating lanterns lay scattered along the ground. Without Maya, no drones buzzed around the asteroid, nor could Itoro see any early remote probes crawling around the walls that they used to detect rich veins of ore. She avoided thinking about how many miners working on the outside of the mine had been lost in the accident. She approached a way station. One of the carbon capture towers had ruptured, leaving fibers from nanotube construction strung out like an exoskeleton. This level of damage shouldn't have happened. Couldn't have happened. Oyigiyigi's safety regulations exceeded OE requirements, since they didn't hold to the most economical standard, but rather operated with care for people in mind. If they wanted, Oyigiyigi members could come down the shafts in a kanzu as if attending a tea ceremony, as their only safety equipment. Itoro began to fear the handiwork of a saboteur, and again wondered where Asagai was. His duty stations were the bridge or the control room. His voice should have been the one calling out, not Max. A few meters ahead, collapsed rock blocked the tunnel, sealing the entrance. Her only choice was to climb. She kept slipping in the near muddy slurry of ash and dirt. Without the nav suit's servos, her muscles ached, straining with each handhold. Shards of pain jolted through her leg. Cold and clammy sweat dampened her forehead. The phase suit operated well enough to collect and clear the perspiration. She struggled to catch her breath, each haggard inhalation straining her chest. Leaning against the cavern wall, she knew she couldn't stop for long because she had far to go. When Itoro reached the top, she found an opening just wide enough to squeeze through. Angling her body, she slipped her arm through and found purchase on the other side, enough to drag herself through. She lost all sense of balance and tumbled down the embankment. Her legs slammed against every jutting rock on the way down, each blow stabbing her with fresh pain. When she landed, she feared moving. Some queen she was proving to be. For Mac to initiate EDS procedure, he'd have to receive approval from the Oyigiyigi Council, at least an elder, or Mungano's camera, the spokesperson for their people. After that, the doors and blast shields, which had automatically closed, would be sealed. Once locked, the anchoring tethers would be retracted, releasing the asteroid from the control station, and it would be detonated. Itoro pulled herself up and staggered down the corridor. This deep in the asteroid, the exposed, ragged tunnel walls' edges were so sharp, if not protected by a nav suit, brushing against them could be like scrubbing with razors. The cool surface of the wall left her wondering if on the other side was the icy vacuum of space. She followed the path to the control room. The space had been retrofitted, little more than a capped-off shaft surrounding a sealed mine shaft. She rested against the emergency generator, enough to marshal her strength. She punched in the start sequence to reset the system. Nothing. The power had gone dead. Mac must have been in the second phase of initiating the EDS. A groan issued from the other side of the room. A body lay half slumped in the corner, huddled behind debris. Asagai. "Mfukazi!" she shouted. "My queen." Asagai coughed and rolled towards her, his bruised face dour and weathered, much like the war-honed short spear he took his name from. "Will you ever quit calling me that? Will you ever stop being a stranger to me? How are you?" Asagai tried to smile, but the gesture caused him to wince. "The question is, who are you?" "Ubuntu. I am because you are." "Good." He allowed her to help him to his feet. Underground, his name rang out, since as foreman he was the camera of the mine. The workers followed his directions with military discipline, a single unit united in purpose. A serious man with a crooked-toothed grin, there was also a darkness about him, as if he learned and accepted every way to die in this place. His thumb had been torn off just above the knuckle. Knowing him, rather than do a biograft or have a cybernetic replacement of the entire digit, he'd simply go without. "Do you know what happened?" Itoro asked. "I have my suspicions." He gestured toward the entrance. He ran his hand along the wall as if the stone talked to him through his fingers. "The explosions were precise, too angled and exact to have been an accident." "Sabotage, as I feared. But why?" "You know why. The lessons of history. Once upon a time, undermined by colonialism, our lands were occupied, our cattle seized, a process that accelerated when our gold deposits were discovered. But now we have the mines. For how long? It is the fear of the inevitable that we wrestle with. In the treaty, in the event of catastrophic event, OE might have a case to rescind the amendment of our sovereignty." "And risk going to war?" "Wars have been fought for less." His skin tinted blue due to lack of oxygen, his face suit more damaged than she could easily assess. With the docking bay a slag heap, she needed to get him to an escape pod. The air seemed to explode with bone-shattering, breath-stealing pressure. The tunnel acted like a rifle barrel, generating winds strong enough to fling a body to the far wall. The emergency alarms blared. Fire suppression measures sprayed in gasps. The blast doors were shut but hadn't sealed. Collapsing, Itoro doubled over in pain. Her teeth rattled in her skull. She vomited. Her phase suit whinged in its attempt to clear it. The stench filled her mask. A thick cloud of dust and debris not only blinded her, but threatened to clog her filters. She operated by the sensors in her visor alone. Itoro felt the maglev tethers release. A shaft, much like the service isocrawl, ran parallel to some tunnels. Slinging Asagai's arms around her, she grabbed a rung. "We'll do this together." Through the viewport windows, the citadel bobbed among the dense asteroid cluster. The domed city itself, a ferry between the massive mining operations. Kralls floated alongside the mine, miniature ships within themselves, adjusting their orbits about it. The citadel was the main platform within the asteroid family, tethered to a leftover planetary core roughly 370 million kilometers from OE and 226 kilometers wide. The metal-rich asteroid contained millions in gold and molybdenum. Many of the other asteroids were 15% silicate and 85% metal, iron, nickel, and cobalt, enough to exceed OE's reserves. Wars, indeed, had been fought for less. When they emerged from the isocrawl, Mac frantically swiped at the console, attempting overrides to continue the EDS. The abandoned mine alert bleated along the emergency channels. "Well, if it isn't she who would be queen." Mac glanced up from his console. "Welcome to your kingdom." "You don't have to do this." Smoke billowed all around her. "I didn't mean for this to happen. Things spiraled out of control. I only intended a smaller accident, just enough to derail operations, allow OE to swoop in and take what should have been ours in the first place, before you swooped in and took our jobs." "I seriously don't have time for your bullshit." Itoro grabbed a loose electro spanner and charged him. Mac didn't even have time to raise his hands before she swung the tool. He was unconscious before he hit the ground. She limped to the control console. Mac had damaged much of the systems, locking her out. Life sign scans showed numerous Unguni trapped between levels. Her people. Those like him weren't about to die for their cause, so he had to have an escape plan, at least for himself. The bridge escape pod still functioned. She dragged Asagai to it, followed by Mac. Watch him. If he gives you any trouble, I will follow my queen's example. Asagai winked. Can you reroute controls from the secondary control room to an auxiliary station? That should regain your command function. Itoro's hands danced across the panel. A hollow image of their asteroid appeared in front of her. Status reports scrolled alongside the image. She ran a bypass for the operating system through Asagai's duty station to an auxiliary panel lighting up the display. Accessing the power relays, she reset the system. Maya began their boot-up procedures. Level after level, the power returned. Itoro programmed the drones to assist in slowing down the asteroid enough for the anchoring tethers to relock. She broadcast a comlink for an emergency intercept. The Citadel could dispatch several Kralls to tow their asteroid back to their cluster placement. The blast doors unsealed and the emergency alarms died. Status nominal, Maya reported. Exhausted, Itoro slid down the console. Asagai stumbled over and sat next to her. Itoro Fee Queen. Asagai turned to her. Long may you reign.
Once again, that was Itoro Fey Queen by Maurice Broaddus. About the episode, Maurice had this to say. Queen Mother Itoro was a character who appears for only a few pages in Sweep of Stars, but I wanted to learn more about her and her backstory, so I wrote about her as a young woman before becoming queen. As genre fans, we're hardwired to make certain assumptions. If a story has magic, dragons, or royalty, it's pretty much going to be fantasy. But Anne McCaffrey and Gene Wolfe fooled us all by giving us dragons made from genetically modified alien life forms and an Earth so far in the future that humans have access to magic-like tools. And now Maurice has given us science fiction royalty. The idea of a queen just working in a space mine like any other average person makes my head hurt a little bit, but in a good, new kind of way, like when someone tells you that there's a completely new use for something. Itoro is a protagonist that I could easily see at home on a throne or leading a mining colony. But she does what needs doing, mainly by not letting anyone go into monologue mode and just shutting him down. Heroes stand there too much. They allow the victim to get a last explanation of why they did it, or how they did it, or how much they hate the hero, when what they should do is what Itoro does. Smack them with a wrench. The book that Maurice made reference to, Sweep of Stars, is the first in a trilogy from Tor, and it came out last year. So if you enjoy this episode, then maybe you should check out Sweep of Stars. Escape Pod is a part of the Escape Artists Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit, and this episode is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives International License. Don't change it, don't sell it, but do share it. Or review. Or tell a friend. If you'd like to support Escape Pod or our sister publications, please rate or review us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite app. We are 100% audience supported, and we count on your donations to keep the lights on and servers humming. You can donate via 4 platforms. On Patreon and Ko-fi, search for Escape Artists. On Twitch and YouTube, we're at EA Podcasts. That's one word. You can also use PayPal through our website, escapepod.org. Patreon subscribers have access to exclusive merchandise and can be automatically added to our Discord, where they can chat with other fans as well as our staff members. Our opening and closing music is by Daikaiju. You can hear more about them at daikaiju.org. That's DAIKAIJU.org. I couldn't think of any way to end this episode than a quote from Queen Latifah. You can't let fear paralyze you. The worst that can happen is you fail. But guess what? You get up and try again. Feel that pain, get over it, get up, dust yourself off, and keep it moving. I have a feeling Latifah would like our queen with a broken leg. But thanks for listening and joining us, and we hope we see you next week. Take care. Have fun, stay safe, and stay kind.